while camping in the rugged wilderness of Montana. My son coldly deserted me without food or gear and said, "Farewell. Go face the grizzly." He thought I'd perish from hunger or a bear's claws, leaving him to claim my inheritance. But when he returned home, I was already there, waiting with a calm smile. "I have something for you," I said. "You won't believe what happens next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and share where you're listening from in the comments." The front door burst open without warning. Caleb stormed in, his jacket damp from Seattle's drizzle, boots squeaking across my hardwood floor. "Dad, I need $8,000 now." I froze at my desk, pencils still in hand from reviewing invoices. The sharp edge in his voice hit like a blow. This wasn't my son asking for help. This was a stranger making demands. "Caleb, what's this about 8,000 tonight?" He paced my living room, hands clenched into tight fists. "I sent your monthly allowance last week. 5,000 barely covers my rent," he snapped, voice cracking with frustration. "You think that's enough? You think it covers everything?" My denim shirt felt suddenly tight. Grease lingered under my fingernails from repairing misses. Carter's engine earlier. I'd built my auto repair shops from nothing. Worked 20-hour days after Laura died. Sacrificed everything to give Caleb opportunities I never had. "Son, we've been over this. You need steady work." "Work." Caleb spun around, face flushed with anger. "Why should I toil when you're hoarding all this money? When you control everything like some king?" The accusation stung. I straightened, old military posture kicking in. "I'm trying to teach you responsibility." "Responsibility," he laughed bitterly. "Want to know about responsibility? After you're gone, I'll run your shops better than you ever did." His words hung like poison. My chest tightened. The casual way he spoke of my death, the calculation in his eyes, this wasn't grief or frustration. This was greed. I opened my mouth, but no words came. 22 years of single parenting, of sacrifices, of hoping he'd become the man Laura would have been proud of, all crumbled in that moment. Caleb must have seen my shock. His expression shifted, realizing he'd revealed too much. Without another word, he turned for the door. The slam echoed like a gunshot. The family photo on the mantel shook, Laura's smiling face trembling behind the glass. I stood motionless, watching the photo settle. Silence pressed against my ears. Outside, Caleb's car engine roared and faded into the distance. I remained frozen, pencil gripped in my white-knuckled hand, staring at that photo, its gentle trembling refusing to stop. The next morning, I reached up to adjust the family photo. Laura's face beamed back, radiant, holding 6-year-old Caleb at his Little League game. The memory hit like a punch. Laura's funeral lup in an oversized suit, clutching my hand as I fought to stay strong. The mortgage on my first shop was 5 months behind. Laura's medical bills had drained us dry. I'd promised her, in her final breath, to care for him, to give him everything she couldn't. By Wednesday, I was poring over old photo albums. Each page revealed sacrifices I'd forgotten. Caleb's private school tuition, $50,000 a year, because public schools weren't good enough for Laura's son. His Montana State University education, complete with the upscale dorm he insisted on. The Chevy Cruze I bought for his graduation, $22,000 in cash because he refused a used car. I traced a photo from his 17th birthday. Even then, something was missing in his eyes. While other kids worked summer jobs, Caleb gamed. living off monthly allowances I justified as investments in his future. The pattern was clear now, spread across decades of pictures. Every handout, every bailed-out failure, every crisis solved with my checkbook had chipped away at his character. I thought I was a good father. Instead, I'd created a stranger who saw my death as a transaction. Friday evening, I sat in Laura's old armchair, the one I couldn't bear to remove. She would have seen this coming. Laura always understood people better than I did. She would have pushed Caleb toward independence, made him earn every penny. I failed her. I whispered to the empty room. The realization settled like winter frost. For 22 years, I'd tried to buy Caleb's love to make up for the mother he lost. Every payment was a bandage over my guilt, my inadequacy. I'd convinced myself providing was parenting. Saturday morning, I shelved the albums and sat at my desk. My hands trembled as I reached for pen and paper. Military discipline steadied my breathing. I needed to think clearly, to plan for possibilities I'd never wanted to face. The blank page stared back, waiting for decisions I wasn't ready to make. 1 ring, 2 rings. My pen hovered over legal documents when the phone broke the silence. Caleb's name glowed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, son. Dad. Hey, how are you?" His voice carried a forced cheer that set my teeth on edge. Too bright, too eager, like a salesman's pitch. "I'm fine. This is unexpected after last week." "Yeah. About that. I've been thinking. I was out of line, and I want to make it right." His words came too fast, too rehearsed. "Actually, I have an idea. Something to fix everything between us." I waited. Military training teaching the power of silence. "Let's go camping in Montana, Glacier National Park. Just you and me. Like when I was a kid." Remember, the proposal hit like a shockwave. Caleb hadn't cared for outdoor activities since middle school. "This is sudden." I know. But my friends canceled last minute, and I've got these bookings that'll go to waste. Everything's paid for flights, camping gear, park permits. The package expires tomorrow if we don't use it. My grip tightened on the phone. The urgency felt staged, designed to stop me from thinking too hard. "Caleb, when have you ever planned camping trips?" "Come on, Dad. Remember teaching me to read tracks? Start a fire with wet wood. You always said the wilderness shows a man's true character." The reference to our past twisted my heart. Those were good times. Before Laura's death changed everything. Before I started solving problems with money instead of presents. "This could be our chance to reconnect," Caleb continued, his voice softening to a sincere tone. "To remember what we had. No distractions, no city stress, just father and son in nature's heart." I closed my eyes, hope battling instinct. Every rational part of me screamed, warning the timing, the sudden enthusiasm. The convenient story of canceled friends, it all felt orchestrated. But beneath suspicion lay a deeper pain. What if this was real? What if my son truly wanted to rebuild our bond? "The flights leave April 20th. Caleb pressed, "Seattle to Kalispell. Then we drive to the park. 7 days in the wilderness. Like the old days. 7 days," I repeated slowly. "Dad, please. These bookings are burning, and this might be our last chance to fix what's broken." Silence stretched between us. I looked at the legal documents on my desk. Precautions against possibilities I prayed wouldn't come true. "All right," I heard myself say. "Let's do it." "Really, that's fantastic. I'll send the flight details. Meet me at SeaTac Gate. This will be amazing." "Dad, You'll see. The call ended. I set the phone down carefully, my hand trembling. Outside, Seattle's endless rain traced patterns on the window. I glanced at the documents, then the pen in my hand. Hope and preparation both felt like betrayal. 5 days later, I folded the legal papers and slipped them into my travel bag's hidden pocket. They felt heavier than they should, weighted with choices I'd never wanted to consider. Caleb waited at gate D14, bouncing on his heels like an eager teen. His backpack looked brand new, tags still on the zippers. When he spotted me, his grin stretched too wide. Dad. Perfect timing. They just called boarding. You seem excited. I studied his face, noting a slight twitch in his right eye. Military training had taught me to read nervous energy, to distinguish genuine enthusiasm from performance. Why wouldn't I be father-son adventure in the last frontier? He hefted his pack with visible effort. When's the last time we did this? On the first flight. He chatted nonstop about wilderness photography and fresh air, checking his phone more than seemed necessary for someone eager to unplug. I shared stories from my Navy survival training, reading weather patterns, identifying edible plants, navigating without GPS. You really know all this stuff? Caleb asked, scribbling notes on a napkin. 22 years in the service teaches you to be ready for anything. Something flickered across his face, calculation masked as admiration. Our layover in Spokane stretched longer than expected. Caleb excused himself 3 times, claiming bathroom breaks that lasted 25 minutes each. Through the terminal windows, I watched planes taxi against a gray afternoon sky. Montana drawing closer. The final flight carried us over mountain ranges that looked like shattered bones against the horizon. Caleb pressed his face to the window, but his reflection showed tension, not wonder. Kalispell hit us with crisp air and the scent of pine. The rental car counter was efficient Ford Explorer. Extra insurance. Chains for mountain roads. I handled the paperwork while Caleb loaded our gear, favoring his left shoulder like it ached. Outdoor store next, he announced, checking his phone again. Need a few extras. At Big Sky Outfitters, he insisted on specific items: high-powered flashlights, emergency flares, rope more than seemed necessary for basic camping. The clerk, a weathered man with wind-burned scars, raised an eyebrow, planning to get lost out there. Just want to be prepared, Caleb replied quickly. Highway 2 stretched before us like a dark ribbon through endless forest. Mountains rose on both sides, snow-capped peaks catching the last daylight. Road signs warned of elk crossings and icy conditions. Beautiful country, I said, trying to bridge the silence. Yeah, really isolated, Caleb replied, his voice carrying a strange satisfaction. Miles from anywhere. We stopped for gas as darkness fell. While I filled the tank, Caleb wandered to the convenience store. Through the lit windows, I watched him pull out his phone and dial, his posture shifting, shoulders hunched, voice low and urgent. When he returned, I asked casually, "Everything okay?" "Saw you on the phone, just checking weather for tomorrow," he said, avoiding my eyes. Storm moving in, but should clear by morning. The lie came too easily. I checked the forecast myself, clear skies for the next 5 days, as we pulled back onto the highway. That familiar military unease settled in my gut, the same instinct that kept me alive in hostile zones. Something was wrong. I just couldn't pinpoint it. 60 miles later, the gas station conversation still gnawed at me. So, what did the weather service really say? Caleb's grip tightened on the door handle. Possible flurries. Nothing major. The deflection confirmed my suspicions, but I kept my tone neutral. Good thing we packed extra layers. Glacier's entrance appeared around a bend, wooden signs marking the park boundaries, cabins scattered among towering pines. The visitor center buzzed with early morning activity despite the off-season. Most tourists came in summer. April visitors were serious outdoorsmen or locals. Glacier Lodge looked exactly like Caleb's brochure photos log construction. Rooms named Bear Hollow and Moose Creek. The desk clerk, a young woman with calloused hands, processed our registration while Caleb studied trail maps on the wall. First time to Glacier, she asked. For him. I nodded toward Caleb. I've been to Montana before. Military exercises. Which trails are you considering? Caleb stepped forward before I could answer. 2 Medicine backcountry route. We want the full wilderness experience. The clerk's expression shifted to concern. That's advanced terrain? Very remote. Most start with shorter trails. We're experienced campers, Caleb insisted, though his experience included no camping trips in the past 15 years. Park Ranger Emily Carter looked like she belonged on a recruitment poster, confident, capable, with a no-nonsense air from handling wilderness emergencies. Her briefing room smelled of coffee and cedar, walls covered with topographic maps and wildlife photos. Gentlemen, let's be clear about what you're undertaking. She spread a detailed map across the table. 2 Medicine route takes you 50 miles from the nearest ranger station. No cell service. No other campers this time of year. She pointed to red markers on the map. Recent grizzly activity here, here, and here. Cubs spotted last week, meaning a protective mother nearby. Wolf packs reported, and elk can be aggressive during spring disputes. Caleb leaned forward, studying the isolated sections with intense focus. What about emergency evacuation helicopter rescue, weather permitting? Could take days if conditions worsen, Ranger Carter said, her stern look suggesting she'd seen too many overconfident tourists become statistics. I have to ask, what's your combined wilderness experience? I answered honestly about my military background, while Caleb mumbled vague references to camping with friends. The ranger's doubt was clear. Sir, with respect, this route isn't for beginners. We have guided tours, shorter trails. We'll be fine. Caleb interrupted. My father's practically a survival expert. After signing liability waivers and watching bear encounter videos, we rented bear-resistant food containers and an emergency beacon. I insisted on a defensive rifle rental, a Remington 700 familiar in my hands. You sure about that? Caleb asked nervously. Montana Rule 1, never go unarmed in bear country. Our final stop was programming GPS coordinates into the emergency beacon. Ranger Carter demonstrated the activation sequence with precision. Press this button, hold for 6 seconds, and rescue gets your exact location. But in that backcountry, even with coordinates, help could take 15 to 20 hours minimum. Loading our packs into the truck, I felt pre-mission tension. Every detail screamed warning the remote location. Caleb's obvious inexperience, his strange insistence on isolation. Still sure about this route? I asked as we drove from the ranger station. Absolutely. No turning back now. Right, Dad. The phrase hit wrong, less encouragement, more finality. Through the rearview mirror, I watched the ranger station vanish behind the forest. Our last link to civilization fading into a wilderness that felt less like adventure and more like a trap. The forest road narrowed until branches scraped our windows like skeletal fingers. My GPS showed our position moving deeper into unmarked territory. Past the last cell tower, beyond the final trail marker, into a wilderness that had swallowed unprepared travelers before. We're off the grid now, I murmured, watching signal bars disappear. Caleb's laugh sounded hollow. Perfect. Just us and nature. Mile 35. 2 medicine marked the end of the drivable road. I parked beside weathered wooden posts that looked like grave markers in the dim afternoon light. Unloading our packs revealed the weight difference. Mine was balanced from decades of military training. Caleb's bulged awkwardly with untested gear. "God, this thing's heavy," he complained, struggling with the straps. "Proper packing takes practice," I said, adjusting his load, noting his wince when I touched his left shoulder. "You hurt yourself." "Old injury. Nothing serious." The trail wound through dense pine forest where sunlight barely penetrated. Moss-covered logs created obstacles, and small streams required careful navigation. Wildlife signs appeared immediately, massive elk tracks in muddy patches, hawk cries echoing above the canopy, distant howls signaling wolves. Here that Caleb stopped, face pale, wolf pack, probably 7 miles away. I kept walking, but his nervousness wasn't about wildlife appreciation. For someone who'd insisted on this remote route, he seemed genuinely frightened by its realities. 4 hours of hiking brought us to a clearing beside a rushing creek, a perfect campsite with flat ground, fresh water, and clear sightlines. Military habits kicked in as I surveyed defensive positions and escape routes. Caleb sat heavily on a fallen log. "How much farther?" he asked, breathing hard. "This is good for tonight. We'll push deeper tomorrow." Setting up camp revealed Caleb's inexperience. I established our perimeter methodically. Food cache hung 15 feet high. Cooking area downwind from sleeping quarters. Emergency supplies accessible. Caleb struggled with basic tent assembly. "Dad, can you help?" He held up tangled guidelines like surrender flags. Teaching him proper technique felt like old times when he wanted to learn. Not just inherit, but something nagged. Why insist on wilderness camping when you can't handle basic equipment? The evening campfire cast dancing shadows across our clearing. I prepared a simple meal while Caleb sat unusually quiet, staring into the flames with an unreadable expression. The temperature dropped steadily. April nights in Montana demanded respect. "Remember when we used to do this?" I tried conversation, hoping to recapture connection. "You were maybe 8, insisted on roasting marshmallows until they burned. Mom was still alive then." His voice carried unexpected sadness. "She loved our camping trips. Said they brought out the best in people." Caleb nodded, but his eyes remained distant. "Tell me about your childhood." "Dad, before the military, before the shops. What was it like being poor?" The question surprised me. Caleb rarely showed interest in my past. I shared stories I hadn't told in years growing up in rural Idaho, working ranches in summer, earning every dollar through sweat and grit. "Sounds tough," he said, but his tone suggested calculation, not sympathy. "Hard work built character. Taught me the value of earning what you have." Something flickered across his face, resentment. Maybe frustration, but his voice stayed neutral. "Lucky for me." Right, skipping all that character building. The conversation continued by the fire. Caleb prompting stories about my military service, survival training, skills that kept me alive in hostile environments. I shared more than usual, encouraged by what seemed like genuine interest. "How do you know when someone's lying?" he asked suddenly. "Body language, voice patterns, inconsistencies in their story," I said, poking the fire, sending sparks into the darkness. "Why?" "Just curious. You've always been good at reading people." Later, as I banked the fire for the night, a peaceful silence settled over the campsite. Stars shone in patterns unseen since my last deployment, untouched by city lights. The wilderness felt pristine, almost sacred. "I'll take first watch," Caleb volunteered. "Not tired yet." You sure long day tomorrow? Yeah, I want to enjoy this. Listen to the forest. I crawled into my tent, trusting my son to wake me for the second shift. Through the nylon walls, I heard him moving around the fire, adding logs, settling into position. Normal camping sounds that should have been comforting, but as sleep neared, something about his offer bothered me. Caleb had never shown interest in solitary reflection or nature appreciation. Why now? The last thing I noticed before exhaustion took over was a change in the sounds outside, no more casual movement. Just a careful stillness suggesting someone waiting, not watching. Dawn light filtered through my tent, stirring me awake. Outside, I heard metallic clanking gear being loaded. Too early. Too urgent for normal preparations. I unzipped the flap and stepped into frigid air, my breath visible in white puffs. Caleb stood by the truck, packing gear with a military efficiency he'd never shown before. Every piece of survival equipment, GPS, emergency beacon, rifle, food containers disappeared into the vehicle. What's going on? My voice cut through the morning silence. Caleb startled, then stood defiant. Getting ready to leave. We planned 4 more days. What's the rush? Change of plans, he said, avoiding my eyes, continuing to load. Weather's turning bad. The lie hung like smoke. Yesterday's forecast was clear, and the sky showed no clouds. My military instincts, dormant since Montana, screamed warnings. Caleb, talk to me. What's really happening? Something snapped in his expression. Years of suppressed resentment exploded across his face like a dam breaking. You want to know I'm done. Done with your control, your manipulation, your constant judgment. Son, I don't understand. Don't, he snapped, wheeling around, fists clenched. Don't call me son. Sons aren't treated like employees. Sons don't beg for every dollar while their father sits on millions. The venom in his voice struck like blows. This wasn't momentary anger. This was hatred festered for years beneath our family's surface. I've given you everything. I said. You've given me nothing. Caleb spat, voice cracking with rage. You made me dependent, kept me weak, controlled my life with your checkbook. Well, I'm taking control now. My hands trembled as the truth dawned. The camping trip, this was all planned. Finally catching on. Military genius. He sneered, his laugh cold. Took you long enough. Why? Caleb, if you needed money, we could have worked something out. I don't want your allowance anymore. Dad, I want what's mine by right, your business, your assets, everything you've dangled over me for years. The cold morning air seemed to freeze around us. I stared at this stranger wearing my son's face, his words shattering 22 years of paternal love. You're planning to leave me here. Very good. Yes, I'm leaving you to figure things out. Maybe 50 miles of wilderness will teach you what dependence feels like. My chest constricted. Caleb, this is bear country. No equipment, no GPS. Should have thought of that before making me your puppet. He slammed the truck's tailgate. Maybe you'll survive. Maybe you won't. Either way, I'll inherit what's mine. Please, I said, the word raw in my throat. Whatever I did wrong, we can fix it. Don't do this. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, doubt, or remembered affection. Then his face hardened into something unrecognizable. Goodbye, Dad. He climbed into the driver's seat. Try not to meet the Grizzlies too soon. I want you to think about what you created. The engine roared. I stepped toward the truck, desperate to reason. but he reversed and sped away. Through the windshield, I saw his face cold, calculated, devoid of filial emotion. Caleb. My shout echoed off distant mountains as the truck vanished around a bend. The engine's sound faded, leaving me on an empty dirt road in Montana's vast wilderness. 50 miles from the nearest human, dust settled around my feet. The silence was absolute, no human sounds, no machines, just whined through pines and a distant hawk's cry. I stood processing the enormity of what had happened. My son, whom I'd raised, protected, provided for, had sentenced me to death. The dust from Caleb's truck still lingered when military training overrode my devastation. Shock was a luxury I couldn't afford, not 50 miles from civilization in Grizzly country. I forced steady breaths, letting Navy discipline take over. First rule of survival: assess resources. I checked my pocket's wallet. House keys, a small folding knife I'd forgotten. No food, no water, no GPS, no beacon, just the clothes on my back. Second rule: evaluate the environment. April in Montana meant freezing nights. The terrain was dense pine forest, unmarked trails, total isolation. Ranger Carter's warnings echoed grizzly activity. Wolf packs, unpredictable elk. Third rule: prioritize needs: shelter, water, signaling, navigation. I studied the sun's position, calculating direction. East led deeper into wilderness. West eventually hit the main park road, though I didn't know how far. My memory pulled fragments from the ranger station briefing. Rivers flowed generally northwest toward the park boundary. Movement was critical, standing still meant death. I walked west, following Caleb's faint tire tracks. Within 200 yards, the tracks veered from an animal trail cutting through the underbrush. Game trails often led to water, vital for survival and rescue visibility. Every step took effort. At 60, my knees ached on uneven ground, my civilian fitness far from military peak. But anger fueled me, fury at Caleb's betrayal, my own blindness, the years I'd wasted enabling his transformation into this monster. The forest closed around me like a tunnel. Giant pines blocked sunlight, creating a twilight atmosphere at midday. I broke branches as I walked, leaving crude markers for potential rescue teams, though the odds of being found seemed impossibly slim. Bear signs were everywhere: claw marks on bark, massive paw prints in mud, fresh scat that raised my pulse. I made noise while walking, recalling Ranger Carter's advice to avoid surprise encounters. The irony wasn't lost: my son had placed me where bears were the least of my worries. Hours passed. My mouth grew parched. The game trail twisted through thick vegetation, and I lost it several times. Forced to backtrack. Exhaustion crept into my legs, but stopping meant losing daylight. A distant sound froze me, mechanical, rhythmic, human-made, engines, multiple. I stood still, listening. The sound came from the north, maybe a mile away, ATVs or motorcycles, moving methodically. Hunters, rangers. Search and rescue hope surged for the first time since Caleb's betrayal. I changed direction, pushing through undergrowth that tore at my clothes, toward the mechanical sounds. The sounds grew louder, definitely ATVs, moving slowly. The forest thinned, and through the trees, I glimpsed a clearing. The engines were close now, perhaps 300 yards. I moved faster, abandoning stealth for speed, branches whipping my face as I rushed toward salvation. Breaking through the tree line, I stumbled into a clearing where 6 ATV riders had stopped for a lunch break. They looked up in shock as I emerged, disheveled, scratched, clearly out of place. The lead rider, a bearded man in his 50s with the weathered look of an outdoorsman, shut off his engine and approached with concern. "Sir, what happened? Why are you out here alone?" My voice came out hoarse from dehydration and stress. "My son left me here, took all our gear, and drove away." The man's expression shifted to disbelief. "Someone abandoned you?" "That's attempted murder. I'm Alan Sullivan. My son Caleb brought me on a camping trip," I said, struggling to explain without revealing the full family dysfunction. "He took our truck and all survival gear. Said he was leaving me to die." "Good Lord." The man removed his helmet, revealing sharp eyes assessing my condition and story. "I'm Robert Hayes, former park ranger. These are my friends. We're on a backcountry tour." The other riders gathered, their faces showing the horror outdoorsmen feel at deliberate abandonment. A woman in her 40s handed me a water bottle, which I drained gratefully. "How long ago was this?" Robert asked, his tone urgent. "This morning, about 6 hours ago." Robert exchanged glances with his group. "We need to get you out now. Radio range is limited, but we can reach the ranger station from higher ground. There's more," he continued, checking his GPS. "If your son took the main road, he's facing an 8-hour drive to Kalispell. But I know a shortcut, an old ranger trail through the backcountry. We can have you at the park entrance in 2 hours." The implication hit like lightning. "You mean I could get back before him easily?" Robert said. "The question is, do you want to involve the police now, or do you have other plans?" Something hard crystallized in my chest, replacing despair. Caleb had planned my death, counted on my helplessness. He'd made one critical error, underestimating the wilderness community and my survival instincts. "I want to get to the lodge first," I said carefully, "before deciding on police." Robert nodded, understanding passing between us. "Climb on behind me. We'll take the ranger trail. Your son won't see us coming." The ATV ride through hidden forest paths revealed a side of Glacier I hadn't imagined, a network of service trails known only to rangers and serious guides. Robert navigated with the confidence of years spent on these routes. "I was a ranger here for 18 years, he explained over the engine. "Seen plenty of foolish choices, but deliberate abandonment, that's criminal." The terrain blurred past creek crossings, steep inclines, sections where we dismounted to guide the ATVs around fallen trees. Despite the rough conditions, we made excellent time. Emerging onto paved road ahead of Robert's estimate, Glacier Lodge appeared in the distance, its log cabins welcoming after my morning in the wilderness. As we approached the parking lot, I scanned for our rental truck not yet returned. "Looks like your son's still driving," Robert observed. "You've got time to prepare whatever you're planning." The other riders offered contact information, promising to testify if needed. Robert handed me his card with his personal cell and email. "Call when you're ready to talk to authorities. What your son did needs consequences." As they prepared to leave, Robert paused. "Mind if I ask what you're planning when he gets back?" I looked toward the lodge room, where our belongings waited. Then at the legal documents in my jacket pocket. Caleb had spent years plotting my destruction. Now it was my turn. "I'm going to give him exactly what he wants," I said quietly. "Just not the way he expects." Back in our lodge room, I sat on the bed's edge and pulled out my phone. Robert's card lay beside me, his offer to contact police immediate. But first, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. The legal documents I'd prepared in Seattle felt prophetic, folded in my jacket like a loaded weapon. 5 weeks ago, I'd changed my will in a moment of paternal disappointment. Now, that decision seemed like divine preparation. I spread the papers across the desk. Reviewing the attorney's language, Caleb would inherit nothing, Everything went to wildlife conservation, veterans organizations, and a scholarship fund in Laura's name. The irony was perfect. His attempt to kill me for inheritance would leave him with nothing. But documents alone weren't enough. I needed evidence, witnesses, consequences to follow Caleb for life. I dialed Robert's number. He answered on the first ring. "Alan, you settled?" "I'm fine. I need your help with something specific. When Caleb returns, I want everything documented, his reaction, his words, everything. You planning to confront him before calling police? I'm planning to give him what he thought he wanted, the chance to inherit my business. Right until he realizes what he's done to himself." Silence stretched across the line. "That's strategic," Robert finally said. "Want me there as a witness, if you're willing. And maybe bring that digital camera from the trail. Caleb's going to say things a jury should hear." "What time do you expect him?" I calculated Caleb's route: Main Park Road to Kalispell Highway. Likely stops for gas and food. His cautious driving on unfamiliar roads. Between 11 and midnight. He'll be tired, overconfident, expecting an empty room and a grieving father who never returned. Instead, he'll find his intended victim very much alive and very prepared. Robert agreed to arrive by 10:30. I called my Seattle attorney. The conversation brief but critical. Tomorrow morning, the new will would be filed, regardless of tonight's outcome. Caleb's inheritance would vanish the moment the papers hit the courthouse. Next, I contacted the lodge office and arranged an adjacent room for Robert. The clerk, an older woman who'd seen decades of Montana drama, asked no questions. Evening approached with eerie calm. I showered off the wilderness grime, changed into clean clothes, and arranged the room methodically. The legal documents lay on the desk where Caleb would see them immediately. Robert's camera had clear sight lines from the adjoining room. My phone had 911 on speed dial. Military training taught that preparation eliminated variables. Tonight, Caleb would walk into a controlled environment where every advantage was mine. The irony wasn't lost. My son had planned my death in the wilderness. Now I planned his social and financial death in civilization. My plan would leave him alive to face the consequences. At 10:15, Robert knocked softly. He entered with professional photography gear and the grim expression of someone who'd seen too many wilderness tragedies. "Recording equipment set up in the next room," he said. "Audio and video cover this entire space." He gestured to the connecting door. "When he arrives, you'll have everything documented." What happens legally when we turn this over? Attempted murder in the first degree. Montana takes wilderness abandonment seriously. It's a death sentence with extra steps. With your testimony, my statement, and what he says tonight, he's facing serious prison time. I nodded, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. Then we wait. Outside, darkness closed around the lodge like a fist. Through the window, I saw the main road where Caleb's headlights would soon appear, carrying him toward a reckoning he'd never imagined. My phone showed 11:30 p.m. Any moment now, my son would learn his perfect crime had become his perfect downfall. Headlights swept the parking lot, and I recognized our rental truck's engine. Caleb had returned from his failed murder attempt, likely rehearsing grief-stricken calls to report his father's tragic disappearance. I positioned myself in a chair facing the door, legal documents clearly visible on the desk. Through the connecting wall, I heard Robert adjusting his equipment. Everything was ready. Caleb's key scraped the lock twice before catching. He stepped inside, cautious, expecting an empty room. The overhead light illuminated his face, and I watched recognition hit like a physical blow. "Dad," he choked, disbelieving. Hello, son. How was your drive? His face cycled through confusion, shock, and something like terror. How are you here? How did you get back? Turns out I'm harder to kill than you planned. Caleb's legs buckled slightly. He gripped the doorframe, eyes darting for escape routes. I don't understand. I left you 50 miles from nowhere. No food, no water, no gear. Yes, I remember, I said, keeping my voice conversational, almost friendly. Interesting choice of last words, go face the grizzly, really captured the sentiment. Dad, wait. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. You brought me to Montana to murder me for my inheritance. Planned it for months. Chose the most remote spot. Practiced your grieving son act for when they found my body. Caleb's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. The problem with your plan, I continued, standing slowly, is you underestimated the wilderness community. People out here help each other survive, not abandon family to die. Look, if this is about money, it was always about money for you. I cut in. That's what I finally see. Every talk, every camping trip, every moment I thought was bonding, you were calculating my net worth. I walked to the desk and picked up the legal documents. Here's what's fascinating. 5 weeks ago, after our fight, I changed my will. Called it paternal disappointment then. Caleb's eyes locked on the papers. What do you mean changed? I mean you inherit nothing. Not the shops, not the accounts, not the house your mother loved. Everything goes to charity wildlife conservation, veterans groups, scholarships in Laura's name. The color drained from his face. You can't do that. I'm your son. You were my son. This morning, you became something else, a man who planned his father's death for profit. Dad, please, just listen. I listened this morning when you said my control ruined your life. I listened when you said I deserved to die in bear country. I'm done listening. Caleb's composure shattered. You self-righteous bastard. You created this, your control, your manipulation, keeping me dependent while judging every choice. There it is, I said. The real Caleb Sullivan. You want to destroy me, fine, but you made me this every dollar you dangled, every condition, every way you controlled my life. This is your creation. A strange calm settled over me. You're right. I did create this. I enabled your dependence, bought your affection, confused providing with parenting. That's my failure as a father. Then change the will back. Fix this. The will was filed this afternoon. It's done. I walked toward the door, past my son, who looked smaller, diminished. But you're wrong about one thing. I didn't create your choice to commit murder. That was all you. His voice cracked. Where are you going? To call the police. Attempted murder is a felony, even when it fails. Dad. Wait, I paused at the threshold. Goodbye, Caleb. In a strange way, you've given me clarity about who you really are. The last thing I saw before stepping outside was my son collapsing into the chair I'd left, staring at the documents that destroyed everything he'd tried to gain through my death. The fluorescent lights in the Kalispell Police Department interview room buzzed as Detective Maria Lopez reviewed the evidence on the metal table. Robert's recordings, my sworn statement, and Caleb's motel room confession formed an ironclad case. Mr. Sullivan, I've investigated wilderness crimes for 10 years. This is the most premeditated attempted murder I've seen. Detective Lopez clicked through the audio files. Your son's statements are damning. He was always thorough when he wanted something. The The DA will file charges this morning: attempted murder in the first degree, reckless endangerment, conspiracy to commit fraud over your inheritance. Montana doesn't take wilderness abandonment lightly. Through the interview room window, I saw Caleb in handcuffs at the booking desk. A night in jail had stripped his pretenses. No more manipulation. Just a 30-year-old facing the consequences of calculated evil. Robert sat beside me, having driven from Glacier to provide his testimony. What's the likely sentence? 15 to 25 years. Depending on plea deals. Montana views wilderness abandonment as attempted murder. Because it is. I watched Caleb through the glass, feeling no satisfaction. This wasn't victory, just the end point of his choices, built on years of entitlement and resentment. Returning to Seattle today, Detective Lopez asked, "Tomorrow, I need to see my attorney here first. Finalize estate plans." She nodded knowingly. "Securing your new will, among other things." I stood, gathering my jacket and evidence folders. I'm establishing a foundation in my late wife's name. It's fitting that Caleb's inheritance helps those who deserve it. Robert and I walked out into Kalispell's crisp morning air. Traffic moved at Montana's unhurried pace. "What now?" Robert asked. "Back to your shops in Seattle. Back to figuring out who I want to be in my remaining years." I looked at the Rocky Mountains beyond the city. Surviving your child's murder attempt gives remarkable clarity about priorities. Will you visit him during the trial? The question caught me off guard. I considered it. The paternal instinct to stay connected warred with the reality of what Caleb had done. "No," I said. "The boy I raised died in those woods yesterday morning. What's left isn't my son anymore." We reached Robert's truck in the lot. He handed me his card. "If you return to Montana for the right reasons, camping, fishing, enjoying the wilderness, call me. First trip's on me." "Why would you do that?" "Because you survived something that should have killed you and chose to use it to help others. Not grow bitter. That's worth supporting." I shook his hand, feeling genuine gratitude for this stranger-turned ally. "Thank you for everything. Thank the wilderness community. We look out for each other out here." As Robert drove off, I dialed my Seattle attorney. There were foundations to establish, scholarships to fund, a lifetime of enabling to undo through positive action. Caleb brought me to Montana to die for money. Instead, I learned to live for purpose. In trying to destroy me, he taught me the difference between providing and truly caring. The irony was perfect and just. 5 days later, back in Seattle, I received a letter from Caleb in jail. 7 pages of manipulation disguised as apology, promising change if I'd reconsider the inheritance, explaining how prison would ruin him. I read it once, then fed it through my office shredder. Some relationships don't survive attempted murder, no matter how much you've invested. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.